The first question is for Suzanne. So Suzanne, we've seen over the course of the meeting that most of the impact is done afterwards, ex post, like when things have already happened. It seems like in your approach, you have a possibility to measure things en route as you go. And can you elaborate on how it works and what's the difference in being able to have all the data as you go?
Yes, so I think building up a series of resources as you go is really, really important. So, I mean, there's that old adage, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, what's the second best time? It's today. As you start to create those resources, you can start telling stories. And actually, something we found really powerful is being able to talk to our funders about some fundamental research or something one of our facility team has enabled, and then follow it up a year or two later with the progress that's happened, and then the progress that's happened even further. Then they start to become familiar with those stories and they start to become a part of them and they feel ownership over them. So that can be quite powerful. I guess I hope that answers your question.
So I may have a question for Nick. Nick, are you still there?
Yep, still here.
Okay, so Nick, from what you showed us, I have a question. I know that you are engaged in, workshop and discussing with a large public about your study and recommendation that you can make on this topic. But do you have a way to measure how those recommendations are actually applied?
No, not empirically. I wish that we did. Yeah, I mean, one thing we'll be piloting soon at Sussex. I mentioned the green algorithms for HPC kind of carbon tracking tool. That's being launched as part of a new grant that I'm on with collaborators at the University of Cambridge, where this tool will be rolled out to different institutions across the UK. And we're using that as sort of a randomized control trial style design to basically see if we notice a difference in people's energy usage and their behavior pre and post introduction to the tool. But yeah, you kind of need schemes like this, I think, to measure what the impact might be of a given intervention. And it's often difficult, I think, because people know their data much better than I ever will. It's difficult for me to measure what the impact would be in like a microscopy study versus a neuroimaging one. So I wish we had a better way to measure impact, but hopefully, this upcoming trial with the new carbon tracking tool will be kind of a first step towards that, I hope.
Okay, thank you very much. And so maybe now a more general for all the panel, but the last one from the chairs. So I think I mean, you answer if you think you can answer. I don't know. Recently, there were, let's say, a number of approaches using artificial intelligence to, let's say, that propose to measure impact studies of science. Okay, and usually they are working by crossing different databases, I mean, scientific, but also patents, press release, and things like that. So I don't know, did you have any opportunity to follow this kind of approaches? And what do you think, if you can discuss that, about the risk of that and the opportunities? Who wants to start to?
I can maybe sort of in a general way say that I think, of course, there are potentially a lot of benefits to this, right? Because there is so much data out there, much more than we can deal with, right? So it would address that problem.
Yeah.
But I think the concerning part underneath all of this is that sort of this garbage in, garbage out principle, right? And if it can have the impact of increasing invisibilities, right? Because it takes what's already visible and makes that more visible. But as we talked about, right, like imaging scientists and the impact of facilities is something that is not as visible as it should be because it's not recognized, and that it can sort of further that imbalance between visibilities. And that's sort of my concern in this, and why we have to make sure that the data that's out there, that the publications, that the press releases, that the stories we tell are visible and include all of the people who are contributing to the work, so that these tools, as they're being developed and as they're being used, can raise the visibility of all of these people.
Another one for Beyond Square?
I'm not aware, but it would be interesting, to try. I will answer in the same way of Joanna. One of the things with the AI is how you train your AI and how biased is your, input in order to get any output that, can be helpful. But it's interesting from the perspective of some of the discussion of the first day, which is how you can include in the many parameters that we measure these micro impacts of collaboration here and there that are not easy to weight on a regular scale, right? I know number of papers, H index or whatever, right? Or number of grants. I wouldn't be surprised that, something interesting come up from it. And it's basically our job to make a creation in order to have something that can be, valuable and useful, in particularly for my opinion, two parts. One are the institutions who are our, boss, and to take decisions, to also discuss promotions, to discuss allocation of resources, whatever. And also for the, the government, right? The stakeholders, how they decide to push further in an area or not.
Yeah, so basically something that could be useful at the level of the community, of course. I mean, having also the point of view of the local and personal individuals of the imaging scientists. Maybe you have an answer on that?
So I guess in terms of collecting non-standard metrics, one of the things that's a new focus for the Australian government that they're turning towards is collecting user satisfaction metrics as one of our key KPIs. And through that, they look at both the technology, but also the staff support. And so that gives us a really cool way of going straight to our funders with the importance of the support that our experts are providing and how the research community kind of relies on that. So I think that's kind of a cool change in metrics.
So maybe we can open the floor for questions. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you to all the speakers for sharing your work. I repeatedly throughout this meeting, it's been discussed the importance of investing in imaging scientists. With the focus of the meeting being imaging in 2035, to me, that means investing in early career scientists. So if you guys have any ideas, this may be a question more for Johanna and Michelle, but what can we do to recruit and attract trainees to core facilities as a viable career pathway? Because just like in independent research, this it's a role that, can involve skills and opportunities like leadership and grant writing as well.
I think that's a great question. I think one of the things that I've seen being talked more and more about is micro-credentialing and more types of things that allow people who are doing some of what had been considered service work before, that it ends up as a line on your CV, that people who can speak to your dedication and passion can be letter writers, that some of that flexibility in the hiring process is more than just what would be on a standard NIH BioSketch. And what I'm seeing is more support in kind of more direct mentoring, where people help with the cover letters, with the creation of the application materials, and that people who weren't on hiring committees before are now being able to influence the way that jobs are written and the people who are hired. I think honestly, it's a different job market than the one that I was raised in. And so transitions are more common. And so what may have been the goal for me as a job when I was applying is different now. And I think just at least recognizing that and having the variety of opinions is there. But at least what I would say is when there are many more options available. There's a bigger variety in job titles. There's a bigger variety in the requirements that are required for each job. And my hope is that will lead to a better, stronger workforce, but open to all of the feedback for sure.
Here's the second.
Great, thank you.
No?
I guess I can add
Okay.
to that with a non-American perspective.
Mhm.
One of the things that we've seen in trying to recruit team members to the various platforms is the main thing is exactly what was discussed yesterday, having sufficient funding and stability to offer someone a longer term contract. No one wants a 1 year, even a 2 year contract, 3 to 5 years or a permanent position, which is non-existent. That then it's exactly what Michelle was saying. As we see researchers wanting to, or applicants wanting to know what the job entails, wanting to know if there's still opportunity to be actively involved in research versus just service. And I think looking for ways to have fluidity across different roles and responsibilities. In terms of growing the ecosystem as a whole, training, especially in Africa, training scientists to best use and support the equipment that is already there. And I don't know if that's a challenge elsewhere in the world, I think is also critical because otherwise that equipment gathers dust and it's going to be a deterrent to further investment in terms of either people or additional infrastructure.
Maybe I can take a little bit of that. For me, there are two parts of this. One is something that is not easy in any institution. In some institution is to build a career path that you can tell to a person that you are hiring, they can follow, right? And for us was very, something of proudness that in Instituto Pasteur Montevideo, we now have a career path that is recognized from the core facility for the institution. And if you are director of the core facility, regardless that you are an academic or you are career path in technical speaking, you receive same salary. At the same level, you receive same salary. This is something that I cannot do in the hospital because it's an academic environment and you have to compete for academic positions. So in my opinion, having a career that you can have all the different blocks or steps helps a lot because, well, the people can know where are the little things or the different achievement they can need in order to get to the next step. But about the training, I absolutely agree with Karen. In Latin America, one of the early learnings is that there was a lot of technology out there in many centers capable of doing some of the technologies and technique that we master. So multiphoton, film, hyperspectral imaging, and they were never touching the bottom, never using the technology. Why? Well, because somebody bought it eventually, and then the person retired or moved from another center, and the instrument got in a corner. And the train the trainer program was really something that impacted a lot because these are not the students, these are partners that came into our center to learn how to manage new capabilities in an existing instrument. So I completely agree with Karen about it, the value.
I have kind of two quick things to add to that. The first would be that when we're looking at workforce development, we kind of start thinking before even university. So through a lot of outreach programs and things like that, we have a really great example of one of our core facility staff who's working in technique development and machine learning. And he actually came through an outreach program at a high school that one of our facilities ran back in the 90s. So these kinds of outreach programs where you go out into schools and you explain that this is a viable career path really do have tangible outcomes. And it's really cool seeing that. The other thing I would add is similar is it's just really important that we have viable career pathways for people in technical positions. In Australia, there's starting to be a push towards this, having either a third employment stream that is outside academic or professional. And I know there's a global push for this through the Technicians Commitment. So if you haven't heard of the Technicians Commitment or explored it, I would thoroughly recommend you go and check that out.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit with our imaging scientists. So first of all, to put it into context, I'm thrilled with the program. Corey Bergman asked me when she became head of the CCI, what can we fund in imaging science? And I said, people. So I'm thrilled she did. And what you guys did with it is just beyond the wildest dreams. Now the devil's advocate bit. It was a bit winner takes it all, right? A few of you ended up with these awards and you got absolutely propelled into the sky. My question is, say instead of getting 100% award, they'd given like 1 day a week to 5 times more people. Would that still have been transformative, or do you think that that would have diluted it to the point that you wouldn't really have noticed a difference?
Passes to the mic. Not that that was a tough race. I think 1 day a week would have not caught my attention and not, as a postdoc, I was already helping in a core facility because I was bored. 1 day a week wouldn't have attracted me. 50%, possibly, like a 50% FTE, possibly. But it would have diluted the impact because I would have assumed that that would be then to focus on the core and find something else for the other 50% of the time. The catch with that might have meant that the positions would have been more sustainable than what we're currently seeing at the end of this grant period, where some of us have ongoing support from our institution. I had a logo up on my slide that I forgot to mention. I've been pulled into the CRIC Africa network as a technology development fellow, which means my institution has for a while underwritten my position with the expectation that I still find cover and cost recovery, but I have that support in a way that I think not everyone does. If you only have 50%, you've already found the other 50%, which might cushion that blow a bit. But I think it would have diluted probably the community impact as more than anything else.
I think it could have easily been 10 times as big for the people who could have been impacted. But I agree with Karen that starting with a grant mechanism that made sense to the academic side, where my entire time was covered. I didn't have to justify what half of it was, what 1 day a week was. It was part of my job, was to travel, was to make workshops, was to connect, was to do something new. That was incredibly key. And I would say at UNC, being the first CZI grantee opened doors that I didn't know were there, right? They wanted to take pictures. They wanted to ask what I mean, at that stage, we met in a group of 20 and Priscilla Chan came into the back of the room. And so it was a very small place where we got to hear about what the goals for the new institute was going to be, the new whole mechanism. And that let me learn about what the university's goals were. So I think it wasn't so much that it was fewer, it was that it was first in a way. And so what I would say is any mechanism that sounds very new, I think all universities are very interested in. You know, so if somebody gets that attention, they want to know, what was it? What is it that you might be able to help the region understand about what this new mechanism may be trying to achieve that's different, and how is it the same? So how can they leverage it beyond? And so that was key. And the travel was incredibly key. So I would argue at least 50%. And what I would have loved is 100 to start. And then at the 3-year one, actual help with negotiating how to start weaning off of that, with the goal being not that you get less money, but you get more time. So you could extend your grant time. And that would have been a much more sustainable roadmap for many of us who I had never negotiated those types of things before.
Can I answer in a different angle from? Yes, it's very short. Yes, in a different angle is, for them was very strange that in Latin America there were only 2 applicants, and the 2 got it. Okay, and we have discussion about it, and the reason was because we didn't need a grant for support our salaries. We are in Latin America, most of us are hired by the university or by the institute or whatever. But it helped us to reshape what we did and how we approach our work, and the impact was really tremendous. And I agree with Karen that one day I don't think that it will make a big deal in my everyday at least, and eventually 50% will do. But travel and courses was really significant for us.
Thank you. I think there's a really good for information while they consider future funding models with new funders. So thank you.
Okay, so I'll only answer my second question because my first question got touched on a little bit, but I'll give the option. If you wanted to talk about what is next as you as a grantee and your grant is now at its end of cycle, what are you looking towards next, or what is your greatest concern or your greatest hope? And for everyone else, or you can also answer this question instead, what is your advice for the early trainees heading into 2035 that are new to their positions? Because there's a lot of us in this room. Thank you.
So I guess since mine has already ended, right? What has happened at UNC is we went from a departmental core model. We had 4 light microscopy cores. I was director of 1. We are now institutionally, financially merging. And so my goal is to focus on keeping the capacity and the flexibility of the separate sites, but build in sustainability. What I've discovered is that I like coordinating in administration. So that is kind of my next step for growth. What I would suggest is that people take the time and resources, and if that's coaching or whatever that is, to identify what really brings you value, and chart what that looks like in your career. So if it is something slightly more administrative, that was connecting with the administrators and learning the strategies of my institution, or finding an institution that aligns with yours. And so that's kind of the path I took. I think there are other ones for developers or things like that, but that's kind of my very small wedge.
I'll try to answer very quickly. Going forward, I am looking forward to proving the impact of this and the fruits that will be born that last longer than the funding did. And for sort of more younger people coming into the space, I think my suggestion or recommendation would be to be creative about what the position can be, where resources can come from, especially in the current ecosystem. I think if you are lucky enough to be an institution that gives you a lot of freedom, be creative about what it is that you do based on where resources can come from.
Look, thanks for all those sessions, and I really want to address something to Nick, and I really liked his slide about dark data and how we manage that. We looked a lot at the Astronomy Society, some astronomy researchers, and their secondary use of data is massive. And so I think about the rebound, the concept of rebound, and the opportunity that new IT technology gives us to extract new insight out of old data. So I think that's important, but it can only work if the data is stored properly with appropriate metadata. If we don't have the metadata in our repository to describe the data and how it was acquired, then it becomes dark data. So I don't know, Nick, whether you've sort of considered this in the analysis of your green credentials for data. Remembering that acquiring data also takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the point about secondary data is really important. We've often kind of said that really ideally what's best is having a relatively small number of very high quality data sets that can be used by a lot of people, like you said, with appropriate metadata so people understand exactly what they're working with. And frankly, collecting fewer data sets as well. Like when we look at human neuroimaging in my area, it is very energy intensive to collect data, much more than it is to process it actually. So, in a way, the dream might be having relatively large but comprehensive data sets that are publicly available and ready for use, that kind of conform to good open science practices and are well documented. I fully agree. I think this is a good route to go, but it's often controversial, I think, because the idea of telling people they should be collecting less data, I think, scares people slightly. It's kind of the opposite of what we're normally told. So, there's some tension there, definitely. But yeah, I'm fully with you on that.
So it's time. I think that you think that Claire will talk about. So thank you again for all the speakers.